Africa gained the vote half a century ago, but in many countries this has never been translated into power. Rights may have been won, but tradition and culture have proved far harder to change than the laws. In one small country in the heart of Africa, women seem to have broken through the glass ceiling, achieving parity with their male colleagues in parliament and rising to prominent positions in government. But it took one of the bloodiest episodes in modern history to make this break with the past. 100 days in 1994, which saw the deaths of 800,000 Rwandans at the hands of their countrymen.
There were so many widows, and there were so many women who were poor because they had lost their husbands and property and all that. So as we're trying to put things together, women were able to work together.
Our women were heroes because they were ready to come up and to go with the challenges, but not dying with the challenges.
Having played a vital role in the rebuilding of their country, women in Rwanda have been rewarded with a share of power. Under the 2003 constitution, 30% of all parliamentarians must now be women. But not everyone agrees that these gains are either real or desirable.
Look at the women, and then you look at their background, you look at their CVs. I've always come to the conclusion that many of them, if it was not the 30%, they could really not merit those positions.
Rwanda's economy grew by 6% in 2007, the 14th year of continuous growth since the genocide, and an impressive statistic for a country which is still 90% reliant on subsistence farming. At the forefront of this success are Rwanda's women. Women have always played a role in agriculture, but the events of the last decade have seen dramatic changes in the way that they've been rewarded for this work.
Culture is a strong thing in any community. Before genocide, we found that women were not allowed to inherit land equal to the men. For example, you find that a woman was not allowed to open an account. That was the situation before genocide.
It was a very bad situation for women first, but it seemed not good for the whole country. Yeah, that a small percentage of women could go to school. Actually, a very small percentage. We still see the consequences of such a situation today.
Over the last 10 years, Rwanda has brought in laws guaranteeing equal rights for women. The economic upturn may be coincidental, but women are visibly playing an increasing role in the development of their country. Female literacy has risen from 10% before the genocide to 50%, and their empowerment and education are at the forefront of what the government calls its 2020 vision, the movement to a modern, knowledge-based economy by 2020. Rwanda is today controlled by the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the political wing of the rebel army which took power after the 1994 genocide. The RPF still holds more than half the seats in parliament and, crucially, the powerful office of president. Paul Kagame now runs the country as a civilian leader, but many of the policies he's implemented were formulated as a guerrilla commander in the forests of Uganda and northern Rwanda in the 1980s. As Tutsi refugees unable to return to their own country, the RPF were acutely aware of discrimination. And as a rebel movement, they understood that empowering women effectively doubled their numbers. Rose Kabuye spent 4 years fighting alongside the men, rising to the rank of lieutenant colonel.
I think the RPF had, among the leadership, people who had read about revolutionaries. They had read books about struggles. And when they started, because of what they had read, and because they felt that some of those countries that had involved the women in the liberation war, they felt that women have to be part of it.
In July 1994, the RPF took the capital Kigali, ending the genocide. Even after the years of war, they were ill prepared for what they found.
They were devastated to see so many bodies. I had never seen so many bodies of people lying on just all over. From here to where our base was, about 60 miles away, you would just walk and see bodies all over. So this is something that I had never seen. Yes, I was a soldier, I had fought, I had seen soldiers getting wounded, but I had never seen women and children. I had never seen old people lying, crying for mercy.
Despite centuries of coexistence, the genocide had turned neighbour against neighbour. Hutus who opposed the killing were murdered, but most of the victims were Tutsi. In practice, those who looked Tutsi or did not carry an ID card to prove that they were Hutu. As an ethnic war, women were as much a target as men.
In most wars, you would find that men are targeted because maybe they are fighting. But this war didn't have anybody, didn't spare anybody. And what we saw was that women were a target, especially in sexual harassment. So they were raped, and most of them now have HIV.
A group of attackers reached us at around 6 o'clock in the evening. We left the house one by one, but they had come for my husband, and the moment they found him, they killed him.
Julienne's story is typical. She was living with her husband and 7 children on a small farmstead when the Hutu militia known as the Interahamwe came. After murdering her husband, she and her daughters were raped.
They beat us, undressed us, and we ran until we reached the other side of the hill. They caught my eldest daughter and took her away. They kept her with them, raping her for 2 months, and then they murdered her when the RPF came.
Julienne lost her husband and all 7 of her children in the genocide. Like so many other women, she was left with severe injuries and infected with HIV.
I was 36 years old then. Now I'm 50. Do you know how it feels when you lose all your children? Some women at least were left with one, or have given birth to others, but I have none. The genocide affected everyone, but I say it affected me the most, because I was left alone.
Helpless and alone, Julienne was unable to support herself and struggled to make sense of a world that could bring such misfortune. Oda Gazizingwa is president of the National Women's Council, one of the many organisations set up after the war to help rebuild the country.
You can imagine a woman raped by 30, 40, genociders, and you can imagine the trauma, you can imagine the HIV and AIDS, you can imagine some of them are handicapped, totally handicapped, so that is a big challenge we have.
The RPF victory of July 1994 left it in charge of a country in ruins. When it came to choosing the people to manage the reconstruction, the new government made a bold statement. The women who had fought in the struggle and the women who had suffered in the genocide were not to be forgotten.
A lady was appointed to head Kigali City as a mayor. I think that it was the first time that such a thing had happened in Rwanda. If you talk to people here in Rwanda, it was something very surprising.
I had gone through leadership roles, so I was not scared of being the mayor, except I was scared of the roles I had, especially what I was faced with in that first years after war and genocide, when you had to bring back life in the city.
The genocide had left the country in the hands of women, partly because of the killing, but also because many Hutu men had fled the country, fearing reprisals from the RPF. It was these women, both Hutu and Tutsi, who were left to start the reconciliation process.
We had women, it was a challenge. It is unique in Rwanda. It was a challenge because we had women survivors, we had women with their husbands in jail, we had women who were returnees from other countries outside Rwanda.
129,000 Rwandans, the majority men, were imprisoned for their role in the genocide. The weight of numbers meant that a conventional process of trial and retribution would take decades, and another solution had to be found if the majority of prisoners were not to die in jail. Gacaca has been Rwanda's answer, grassroots justice, where a panel of local judges hears testimony against those accused of involvement in the genocide. Defendants are encouraged to confess their guilt to the community and to ask for forgiveness. Women have played their role in Gacaca too, partly as judges, but more importantly, in forgiving those who killed their husbands and families. Gacaca was brought in to forgive the past, but something more had to be done to guarantee the future.
Women were meeting women survivors, women from those who their husband has killed, and they would form associations, they would work together, and so it became part of the healing process. So I think women played a big role in helping other women and in forging peace.
The Gahaya Cooperative was set up to provide employment for widows and orphans of the genocide. Today it has 3,000 weavers nationwide, producing Rwandan peace baskets for the international market. Every month a new set of women comes in to train, learning a skill but also developing relationships. These women then return home, often taking with them a new perspective on the past. Iphigenia and Epiphany, one Tutsi, the other Hutu, lived in the same village before the genocide. Their story mirrors that of so many women in Rwanda. Iphigenia lost her husband and family to the genocide, and Epiphany lost hers to prison, but together they've built a new life.
We stopped that ideology of saying this one is a wife to a Hutu, this one to a Tutsi. We live together, we weave together. We can't keep on living with what happened before.
If people keep on living in the past, they get tortured. It can't help you anyway. It's good to live together in peace and forgive each other. If we always lived with this memory, we would be poisoning our children, and we don't want our country to have genocide again.
Economic empowerment has helped women to erase the memories of the past, but political empowerment remains the guarantee of their future. In this area, however, progress is far harder to quantify. Rwanda's capital, Kigali, is being rebuilt. The dense neighbourhoods of mud brick bungalows are being torn down to make way for 10-storey office blocks and shopping complexes. Communication and modernity are the new watchwords of a country which has ambitions to be at the forefront of development in the region. The past, however, has not been altogether erased. Rwanda's parliament building still dominates the skyline, carrying the scars of the 1994 battle for the capital. This building became famous for something other than the war, as Rwanda elected 39 women to its 80-member Chamber of Deputies, the highest percentage of women parliamentarians not only in Africa, but across the world.
Our first session in Parliament, I think, was of mixed feelings. There were those of us who had been in Parliament who were excited and very confident, and there are those of us who were happy that we were there, but were just wondering how are we going to contribute.
Rwanda's 2003 constitution implemented the UN target of 30% female representation in Parliament, but even allowing for this, the results were unexpected. As well as the 24 reserved seats, women won a further 15.
It is not only numbers, it was also the quality of those women we are electing to take those positions. And also for the common women at the village level, this gave them a certain message, a message that women can do.
Dr. Isa Kirabu Kasiria had previously practiced as a veterinarian and through her work had developed close ties with the local rural community. She believes that these experiences helped her and other women MPs to bring something new to Rwanda's parliament.
We were forced to think deeply about what we shall do to change the status of the Rwandan woman in the village, out here in the streets. their security, their health, their reproductive health, their production, the whole of their livelihoods. We have come to Parliament to represent these women, and our yardstick is the livelihood or the status of the Rwandan woman.
But not everyone has seen the government's apparent empowerment of women in the same light.
The regime in Kigali since 1994 really, I think for their own reasons, decided to use women as one of those areas to market the country. That's what is going on up to today. Look at the constitution, 30% of women needed in almost all positions, local government, legislature, and everywhere. I think the government of Rwanda picked some areas that it used to market itself, a country coming out of the genocide, out of war. It was the only thing written about.
Charles Kabonero is the editor of Umuseso, the only independent English language paper in Rwanda, and an outspoken critic of the government. He argues that the RPF had other reasons for sponsoring the change in the constitution.
The ruling party here has always fancied being in a situation where people don't really give it hard time. It really fears opposition. And if you look at our women, they are really women who could never dream of opposing this system. Women, naturally, they can be more royal than men. They can be more tricked than men, and they can easily be put down, especially in politics where you need votes, you need support, you need all that. I was talking with some MPs, and one out came out with a funny statement that they have a woman there who has not talked for all these 3 years now. She has been in Parliament for 3 years and she has never talked.
Whenever they elect a woman, for example, a woman mayor of the city, or a minister, or a senator, most of the time you find this kind of the culture coming in, that what is she going to do? Let us see what she is going to do. But they never ask a man who is sleeping in the parliament, because he's a man.
I have no problem with motivating women or bringing in some incentives that help them to really get promoted there. But I always think we should do it differently. That means let's go down there and encourage them to go to school. Let's go there and encourage them to take on some of the courses they would otherwise not go into. And then in future it will just be automatic. We will have them competing. We will have them getting through on merit.
One woman who has shattered the glass ceiling is Lieutenant Colonel Rose Kabuye, a veteran of the Bush War, a former mayor of Kigali and member of parliament. She's now President Kagame's head of protocol. In spite of her achievements, she still argues that women's movements cannot succeed without the backing of their government.
Whenever women struggle on their own, it hasn't been successful. In Europe, in America, everywhere. So this is not something we should have done it on our own. I don't think we could have managed it on our own, because women all over are struggling to be there. But without the help of the leadership, without the sensibility that the leadership accepts that these are part of the people we want to work with, these are the people we struggled with, and we are not going to leave them behind when we're in government, it would not have worked.
Whatever the RPF's motivation, women have not only achieved political representation, but also positions of power in the government. 9 of Rwanda's senators and a third of ministers are now women.
There was nothing special, really. It's the fact that we have been treated equally as men. And because we have been treated equal as men, made us realize that we had talents. So they saw the power of women because our leadership accepted us to be part of them.
The public has also come to accept women in these roles. Isa Kirabo Kasiria gave up her post as an MP in 2006 and successfully ran for election as mayor of Kigali. She believes the only thing holding women back now is themselves.
We are risk averse in a way. That's why maybe we wish sometimes to stay within the same arena that we used to. And jumping out of that arena means you're taking risk and you may make a mistake. I've learned that making mistakes is part of the deal. If I'm to progress, sometimes I need to get out of what I'm used to.
Just as economic empowerment led to political power, the example of women in government is changing the way Rwandan women see themselves.
This has been very important for women because they are realizing that their roles have changed. These are not the women who used to just sit back and wait for their husbands, their sons to give them money. These are women who have to struggle, work, wake up in the morning, go to the markets with the small produce to sell, go back in the evening, take home something. And when they meet in the market, these are all women together. And they are bonded by the fact that this is what we have to do. This is part of, and so it's made them really get out of going back to the hatred, and it has helped them to move ahead.
Our women MPs are an example to the rest of Africa. It makes me proud that we have so many voices in our parliament.
A new generation of women is growing up for whom the past is another country. Their confidence is perhaps a reflection of how Rwanda has changed.
What we have learned as women is that you can achieve anything if you really want to. For example, riding a motorbike, it used to be just for men. Now we're doing it too. All I hope for now is that one day I will save enough to buy my own bike so I could work for myself. I would love to be free to ride a bike that was truly mine. That is my dream.
For the women who've come so far in Rwandan politics, high office is now an achievable dream. But the question is whether this experiment in a small part of Africa will inspire change across the continent.
It's just like men. If you don't try men in positions of leadership, you'll never know their capabilities. So Rwanda has tried women in positions of responsibility, and now the leadership is sure that yes, they are capable and they just have to bring them in. So I think this is a good lesson that other countries also can learn.
It shows unimaginable capacity and passion. And I think what the world thought was a hopeless situation in 1994, we now have a future and a hope.